Hey everybody, welcome to Off the Shelf Board Game Reviews. This is a YouTube channel dedicated to the tabletop gaming hobby. And this video is part of a series of videos looking at the game of Terraforming Mars. It's specifically the Terraforming Mars Ares Expedition standalone game. Now, Terraforming Mars is an action selection and a engine building game that plays from 1 to 4 players. Now, this video is part of a series of videos. In this video, I'm going to teach you actually how to play the game. But if you're just looking for a quick overview, some sample gameplay, an actual review, or just want to learn how to play solo rules, check out the videos in the series. I'll come on back after the break for a full tutorial of the game of Terraforming Mars Ares Expedition. The game of Terraforming Mars Ares Expedition, again, I'm just going to call it Terraforming Mars just for a little bit of simplicity so I don't do any tongue twisters here, is a game for 1 to 4 players. What I'm going to show you how to do here is play a 4-player game. And at the start of the game, the very first thing we need to do is set up the board for the planet of Mars itself. So the first thing we need to do is we need to shuffle all 9 of the ocean tiles face down. Now all these tiles are double-sided. What we're going to do is we're going to place them all face down and we're going to shuffle them up. We're going to place all 9 of the ocean tiles on the planet of Mars itself. Next up, we need to put our tracker to represent our current level of oxygen all the way in the lowest purple level. Then we need to put our temperature track again all the way in the lowest purple level for the current temperature for the planet of Mars. And then next, every single player needs to put their starting marker to show that they have a 5 terraforming rating. Now, your terraforming rating covers multiple different things in the game, but the most important thing and the way you're going to win the game is your terraforming rating is part of your victory points. This is an engine building and an action selection game, but this is also a victory point game. The game is going to come to an end once all 9 ocean tiles have been revealed. The current temperature is at the maximum white level, and the current oxygen level is also at the maximum white level. Once that is done, the players can add up their current terraforming rating, plus any victory points for cards they managed to play or any action that they've happened to get in play on the tableau. We're going to add up all those victory points. Whoever has the most amount of victory points is going to be the grand winner of the game of Terraforming Mars Ares Expedition. After we set up the planet Mars itself, we need to put the 5 action selection markers out here next to the board. Now, these action selection markers, I'm going to be perfectly honest with you, they are extremely superfluous. If you've ever played any kind of action selection game before, you're probably not going to use these, but these are all double-sided, and the basic idea of these is, since this is an action selection game, if any action is selected for the players to perform on that current round, we're going to simply flip these over as a nice visual aid to let all the players know that those are going to be the actions available for this turn. For example, we have 1 for development, we have 1 for construction, we have 1 for actions, we have 1 for production, and then finally we do have 1 for research. And again, these are simply going to be flipped up as the actions are selected, and then every round these are going to be simply going to be refreshed, letting you know that the next round those actions may or may not be available, depending if the players pick those actions for the current turn. And again, like I said, 100% superfluous. You don't have to use them, but they are a nice visual aid for you. Next up, every single player gets a player board, which is going to represent their current production for their corporation. Now, we're going to use these boards to track our current production and also the amount of resources that we have to spend to develop projects. Now, projects are the cards that come with the game. I'll explain how that all works in just a second. But the basic idea is this is going to be used to track your current amount of resources that you are simply producing every single turn. Every one of these tracks goes up from 0 all the way up to 9, plus there's a secondary track to start representing. If you manage to get past the 10, the 20, or even happen to get past the 30, we're going to simply add those to all the amount of resources that you simply produce. Now, to break this down, this is going to be your production of your mega credits. This is how many cards you're going to draw every single turn when you do a production step. This is the current amount of heat that your corporation is producing on the planet Mars. This is the current amount of plant life that you're currently producing for the planet Mars. This represents a discount in steel. This represents a discount in titanium. Now, the big important thing to understand and not make this mistake is these 4 resources right here are actual resources you're going to produce, and you're going to, after you produce these resources, you're going to spend them to take various actions on the board. These bottom 2 tracks are not resources. You're not going to produce these resources at all. They are merely discounts on cards that represent steel and discounts on cards that represent titanium. And yes, some cards may represent both. That means that may be a discount that's going to start tallying up and start compounding on each other. But again, the amount on this track is just simply going to represent, for every single point you have on steel, that's -2 to the cost of any steel card. For every single point on this track, it's simply going to represent a discount of 3 on a card that costs titanium to produce. So discounts, production, nice and simply easy. After that, every single player, now that we have our current amount of production boards, we are simply going to grab our action cards. Now the action cards are color-coded to match our player cubes. You look at the shoulder pads on every one of our Martian explorers, and if it's blue, we're going to take the blue cubes, green for green, yellow for yellow, and again, red for red. That is basically how every single player is going to get their startup and setup for the board. After that, we simply need to put the resources off to the side. We have resources that represent 1 of any single resource, and it depends on which slot it happens to be in. So this is 1 mega credit, this would be 1 heat, and this would be 1 plant. Remember, depending on where you pull the resource from, that signifies exactly what that resource can be spent on. Next up, we have the silver cubes will represent 5 of any single resource, and then the gold cubes would represent 10 of any single resource. So just to break it down nice and easy, if this was my current player board, I currently produce 0 mega credits, but I currently have 6 million mega credits to spend on various different actions. I produce 0 heat, but I currently have 1 heat to spend on things, and there's nothing to spend 1 heat on. But that'll make sense when I start explaining the actions for the game. And then finally, we see that I have 11 plants. Even though I have a production of 0, I currently have 11 plants to spend on things. And at least with 11 plants, I can do a lot of things. There's also a nice reminder on the bottom of every single one of these boards that every single player has, as a nice reminder, let you know the actions that you can spend these resources on, which are additional actions beyond the production cards that you manage to get into play. For example, there's a nice reminder here that at any time on the action phase, we spend 20 million mega credits to add a forest anywhere onto the planet Mars. We spend 14 million mega credits to raise the temperature by 1 point on the temperature track. We spend 8 plants to go ahead and add 1 forest onto the board. We spend 8 heat to raise the temperature up by 1 level. And finally, we spend 15 million credits to flip an ocean tile. Now, the interesting thing about these ocean tiles, one mistake that some people will make the first couple times when they're playing Terraforming Mars, is you need to understand that ocean tiles are not going to increase your production. They're going to give you a one-time bonus when you reveal that ocean tile. So for example, if I were to flip that ocean tile over, I would simply grab 2 tokens represent singles, and I add those to my plants. I am not going to increase my production. That is just a temporary gain of a resource I can now spend. Now, before we go any further, I need to explain to you that there are some basic rules, and then there are some standard rules, and there are some advanced rules for the game. I much prefer to play the game with the advanced rules, but I'm just going to cover the basic rules for you very, very quickly, just so you understand exactly how they work. One of the very first important things to understand about the basic rules is that there are going to be cards that have an asterisk symbol on them. And that asterisk is going to be right on the bottom of every single one of the cards next to the number that happens to be for that specific card. Now, generally speaking, these numbers on these cards don't really matter for the actual gameplay. They're just a sequential number for all the cards that actually come with the game. But for all the basic starter cards, they have a little asterisk next to them. We're not going to play with the starter cards, but the basic idea is just was to find all 16 of these cards at the start of the game. And then you're going to shuffle them up, and every single player gets 4 of those cards to ensure that every single player gets a nice even balance of starting production cards. Now, that's how you're supposed to play the game for the intro rules, but we're going to show you how to play with the full rules of the game. So we're going to go ahead and skip that, and let's go and explain how the full rules actually work. For the full advanced rules of the game, every single player is going to get a hand of 8 production cards. Now, every single card in the game is either going to be a production card or it's going to be a corporation card. So any card that's in your hand, doesn't matter if it happens to be a green production card, if it happens to be a blue action card, or if it happens to be a red one-time use card, it doesn't matter. All these cards are project cards when they're in your hand. Once you put a project card into play, then it can kind of change what it may or may not be, but the basic understanding is every single card is going to be a project card. In addition, there's also corporation cards. But at the start of the game, every single player is going to get a hand of 8 project cards that they're going to draw, and that's going to be their one singular hand of cards. Additionally, every single player is going to get a hand of 5 action cards. Now, these are very different hands of cards. You're not going to mix them up. They're going to keep them very, very separate because they have different actions and different abilities when you're playing the game. After every single player has their full hand of 8 project cards, and again, we're not going to reveal those to other players, simply doing this for convenience of the camera, then every single player is going to get 2 corporation cards. Each player is going to look at the project cards and also the corporation cards that they have in their hand, and then they're going to figure out which corporation they're going to start with, and then they're going to get a chance to discard as many cards from the project cards that they were given in the original initial deal, and then they can discard as many cards as they want from their project cards and redraw their hand back up to 8 project cards. So using the blue player as our example here, we will reveal both of our two corporations without showing them to the other players. And I'll go over exactly what all these cards mean, all these symbols mean very shortly. This is just a setup for the game. Every single player is going to look at the two corporations they have and then look at the starting hand of project cards they have. The basic idea here is you're trying to find corporations that are going to work as well with your starting hand as possible, because you want to be as efficient as possible, because this is an engine building game. So you're simply going to look at your two starting corporations, figure out which one is going to work better for your current starting hand of projects, and then you're going to look at your hand of project cards and you're going to decide to keep as many of these cards as you want. Any cards that you want to get rid of, you will discard them face down. Now, an interesting rule about the game of Terraforming Mars Ares Expeditions, all cards in this game are discarded face down. That means other players never know which cards you're discarding, so they never know if cards that they're looking for have been removed from the game temporarily, because we are not going to bring these discarded cards back into play until we've gone through the entire stack of cards here. Now I just have these draw piles separate out into 4 individual stacks. You don't have to do this, but this is a game that comes with well over 200 cards, and it's very easy for the piles to start getting shuffled around. It's nice and easy just to see these and then see the discard pile off to the side. Again, you can stack them up. If you want to go ahead and make a Jenga tower, I recommend you stack them out and separate them, especially if you're sleeving all your cards. After all the players have decided which cards they want to discard from their hand of project cards, we have to draw back up to 8 cards back into our hand. Then all players will go ahead and reveal their corporations. Once all players have revealed their corporations are going to give every single player some starting resources. And the first important starting resource that we will get is going to be the amount of mega credits we are going to start with. For example, the blue player right here has this corporation right here that shows that we are going to start with 48 million mega credits. And again, we're going to represent these with our resource cubes right here. The golds are 10s, the silvers are 5s, and then the brown or more of the copperish ones are going to represent our singles. So in this example right here, we see we have 3 golds, which is 30, 3 silvers, which is 15 for a total of 45, 3 coppers for a total of 48 million credits. That's how we figure out our starting amount of wealth for every single one of our corporations, and every single one of our players will do this. Now, like I said, Terraforming Mars Ares Expedition is an action selection and an engine building game that's going to play out over rounds. Now, every single player is going to be playing cards out in their tableau, which are going to give them various different abilities, various different resources, various different production, and it's all going to be listed on every single one of these cards, whether it happens to be a corporation card, which may give us random amounts of discounts, or different abilities or ways to generate revenue or anything like that. I'll cover exactly how all the cards work after explaining the actual gameplay itself. So the way the game is going to play out is the game is going to play out over rounds. Every single round is going to start with the planning step, and during the planning step, players are going to take their hand of action cards, and every single player has the exact same hand of 5 action cards. You have develop, you have construction, you have action, you have production, and finally you have research. All the players are at the same time, without letting the other players know what they're going to do, is they're all going to take their hand of action cards, and they're simply going to take 1 action card and they will place it face down. Once all the players have gone through their hands and decided which one of the action cards they want to take and place them all face down, all the players will then reveal their chosen production, action, development, or resource gathering action phase that have been selected for the specific round. Now, the very important rule to understand here is that you cannot play the same action in a row for the same single player. And the way you remember that is you are not going to gain this action card back until you replace it with another action in the following round. And on following rounds, that means that you basically only have 4 actions to select from every round after the first round. Because at the first round, you haven't played any prior action cards, so you have access to all 5 of them. But on future rounds, you have to look at your remaining action cards, and then all players will simply play those action cards face down. And once all players have played their action cards down, then we can get our other action from the prior round back into our hands, and then and only then can we reveal our actions for the following round. So understand, the very important thing is that as you play the game, multiple different actions may or may not be selected. Various different action rounds may or may not occur, but the really cool thing about this game is if an action is selected for the round, every player gets to take that action, not just the person who played that card, but the person who played the card is going to get a nice bonus that's listed on the bottom of every single one of these cards. So now we've explained the rough overview and the idea of how the round structure is actually going to play out. Let's go ahead and go over every single of these actions in order from the first action of development, all the way to the research action, which is the 5th action on every single round. The first possible action for every single one of our players is going to be the development phase. Now, the development phase is played by at least one person at the table. That means the development phase is going to occur for all of our players at the table. But again, if you're the person who actually play the development card, that means you are going to get a bonus. In this specific case, you're going to spend 3 million mega credits less for the development production card that you are going to put into play. Now, the production development cards are green cards, and it's a nice reminder, green action, green cards you get into play. And if you play or do a development, and again, it's not mandatory that you actually do these actions, it's just available to you if at least one person plays that action. So don't think you have to do it. It is an option for you even if you played the card itself. But to put a card into play during the development phase, you simply pay its cost. In this example, this card would cost 19 million credits. But again, as I said, if you actually chose the develop action, that means you and you alone are going to get a discount of 3 million credits as a discount to the purchase of that production card to get into play. So if I play the development card, I would only pay 16 million credits. Whereas if this person decided they want to put a green card and a card into play, they would have to pay the full cost. And again, with this person also, unless that person also paid the development phase, then they also would get the discount. So again, even if multiple people choose the same action, everybody gets to do the action, but only the people who actually chose the action are going to get the discount itself. So that's the development phase. It's used to get the green cards into play, and green cards give us production. We're not going to get the production when the cards come into play, but they will give us production on future rounds, and we're simply going to track this on our board right here. Every time we put one of these cards into play, it's going to modify our current permanent production as long as these cards are in play. And again, I'll explain all these cards at the end of the video here. But we're going to see that this one is going to give us the ability to decrease the cost of all steel producing cards in the future. A steel producing card has this symbol right here. So it can't be a discount for itself, but any future cards I bring into play that have that symbol are now going to have a discount of 4 million credits. Yes, discounts do stack. And also understand one very, very important thing about the game of Terraforming Mars Ares Expedition. Any project card in your hand is worth money if you're willing to discount it, or if you're willing to discard it. You may discard a project card from your hand at any time. You can discard multiple project cards from your hand, and anytime you discard one of these project cards from your hand, face down to the discard pile, you may immediately gain 3 mega credits. That does mean that you can ditch your entire hand if you have a hand of 8 cards. You can throw away all 8 of those cards and gain 24 million mega credits. You can do this during any of the actions, during any of the phases, and matter of fact, it's very important to do so when the last round of the game and the last action is played. It's a good time to go ahead and throw away all your cards because it could help you get those victory conditions. The next action is going to be the construction phase. Now, the construction phase allows you to get any blue cards into play and also allows you to get any red cards into play. Now, blue cards, generally speaking, are going to give you abilities that will trigger when other events happen, or they'll give you actions that you can play during phase 3, which is the action phase. So once you have these cards in play, then you start using their actions, or they can give you their bonuses. But while they're in your hand, remember, when cards are in your hand, they're only worth money to discard. They do not give you any powers, any benefits, or anything until you put them into play or discard them for 3 million mega credits. The nice thing about the construction phase, though, is that you're allowed to play 1 blue card or 1 red card down in your tableau. But if you actually chose the construction phase action, you actually have 2 different options that you and you alone can do, as long as you are the one who chose the construction phase. The first thing you can do is before or after putting a blue or a red card into play, you are free to draw another project card and add it to your hand. Now, you don't have to do this, and if you don't choose to draw a card, your alternate option is to play 2 blue cards, 2 red cards, or a blue and a red card. So that's the bonus of actually choosing the construction step. You can play an extra card or you can gain a card before or after you play that card. And again, as a nice tactic to play in the game is if you're a little bit short on cash, you can draw the card from the production stack, immediately discard the card, gain 3 mega credits, add those 3 mega credits to your board, and then spend those 3 mega credits right then and there to get the card into play that you want. That's simply the construction phase. Next up, we have the action phase. Now, the action phase is the 3rd phase of the round, and the action phase is we as players are going to take all of our actions that are going to help us win the game. Getting production is great. Getting construction out in the game is very nice too. They're not going to help you win the game. Playing the production phase gives you the resources to do the action phase, because the action phase is where we're going to work on our victory for the game. During the action phase, players have unlimited use of the actions at the bottom of the board. That means they can use any one of these actions multiple times in any order they like, because It's very important to say in any order because that might give you the resources you need to do other actions. For example, if I were to spend 15 million credits to flip an ocean tile, and I chose this ocean tile right here to flip it over, and it gave me 2 plants, and 2 plants was all I needed to raise the oxygen level, I could then immediately use the 2 plants I gained from flipping over that ocean tile, spend those 2 plants immediately, and then go ahead and raise the oxygen level up by 1 point. And again, using all these abilities on the bottom of these boards is unlimited as long as you have the resources to pay for it. Additionally, during the action phase, you can use your blue cards. Every single blue card can be used exactly 1 time. Now, there's one little caveat to that, and I'll explain that when we explain the bonus. But various different action cards are going to have a bonus on them, or an action that you perform during the action phase. Now, if an action card allows you to play an action during the action phase, you can simply see if the symbols down here have a blue background. If it's a blue background, it's going to give you an action. If it's a purple background, it's going to give you a trigger that's going to occur when you do something else. So blue is action, purple is triggers. And again, if you haven't learned the symbols right here, the nice thing about all these cards is the words right down here on the right-hand side basically say what all these symbols mean. So while you're learning the symbols of the game, just read the cards. It tells you exactly what every single one of these cards do. Now, the interesting thing about if you choose the action phase, as your bonus, you can use 1 and only 1 blue action card twice in a single action phase. So that's the bonus for actually playing the action for this round. Now, the interesting thing about how we win this game is by terraforming the planet Mars. Again, we're trying to get the oxygen track all the way up to the max level. We're trying to get the temperature track to the max level, and we're also trying to flip over all the oceans. Once we flipped over the last ocean, raised up the maximum oxygen level, and raised up the temperature, that is going to be the last phase of the game. I want to emphasize that's the last phase for the game because this might happen during different actions based on action cards that players may have in play. So understand whatever phase that occurs in is going to be the final phase of the game. Now, as we play cards to raise these tracks, every single action that we do in the game that either flips an ocean, raises the oxygen level, or raises the temperature is going to allow the player who did that action to raise up their terraforming rating 1 point for every level that they raise on the Mars planet itself. So if for some great magical card play, somehow I managed to play a group of cards that allowed me to raise oxygen level up 4 points, I would raise my terraforming rating up 4 points also. It's not 1 TR terraform rating per action, as per level that you raise on this track. And again, spending these resources, I can raise up multiple of these tracks, gain multiple terraforming ratings. And TR is very important because remember, terraforming rating is part of your victory points. It's also going to be part of your production, which we'll explain in just a moment here. One important thing to understand about this game, though, is that all phases are simultaneous. All players are doing the action phase at the same time. All players are doing the development phase at the same time. All players are doing the research phase at the same time. That does mean that if one track manages to get up to its max level, all players can still take advantage of playing cards that allow them to raise that track, still gain terraforming rating from doing those actions. But once this phase is over, players can still play cards that allow them to do those actions, but they won't raise the individual tracks and they won't gain terraforming rating from doing those actions on future turns. Cards can still be played, but they're not going to give you the TR or the bonuses from raising up those tracks. Also understand that there are cards in the game that require these certain tracks to be at certain levels, whether it's certain ocean levels revealed, certain temperatures to have occurred, certain oxygen levels. If those have not occurred, those cards cannot be played at all. So make sure you're watching those cards. Again, I'm explaining how all those cards work after I am done explaining how the round structure is. There's only one minor caveat to the rules here and something to understand that can occur. It's not a very common occurrence, but it can definitely occur that if a final ocean tile is flipped over during the action phase, revealing resources that are going to be gained by a player by performing whatever action allowed them to flip over that ocean tile, that doesn't mean that other players can't also do actions on this action phase, because remember, they're all simultaneous. All the players on the current action phase can still perform actions that would allow them to flip ocean tiles. Since there's no more ocean tiles available in the game, they will simply duplicate the last ocean tile that is flipped over. Also, one other final thing is when players are building forests, they're simply going to gain these forest tokens right here. Now, these forest tokens are victory points at the end of the game. They're simply singles or 5 points, but every time you gain one of these forest tokens, you will raise the oxygen level up 1 level. And remember, anytime you raise the oxygen, raise the heat, or flip an ocean tile, you will gain 1 terraforming rating. So use these plants to plant these forests. While you don't actually have a tracker on the board to represent the forest, you are still going to manipulate the ocean or the oxygen level, still gain these force, and these are worth victory points at the end of the game. Next up, we have the production phase. Now, the production phase is the phase where players are going to gain all the resources, which are basically going to allow them to do all the actions they need to do in the game. Whether it's development, construction, action, or anything they need to do, it's basically gain all those resources during the production phase. Now, the production phase will occur for all the players if at least one person plays the production phase, but the bonus for playing the card is you are also going to gain an extra 4 million credits added to your corporation board. And that's only going to be a bonus for the person who actually plays the production phase. So if multiple players play that production phase, then multiple players will get that bonus. Now, the amount of production you are going to gain is basically tracked on your board right here. But if you ever forget, it's very easy to look over your development cards, and any symbol that happens to have an orangish, reddish background, as you see right here, is a permanent addition to your production. It's a very important thing to understand about Terraforming Mars Ares Expedition. If a symbol does not have this orangish red background, it's not production. It's just a temporary one-time gain of whatever that resource happens to be. So we can see by looking at our board and also re-looking over our cards, we can see where our current production happens to be. We see for the blue player, their current income is 4 million mega credits, and we keep that on the number 4 to track that on our board right here. We see that we are not gaining any cards because we don't have any card production on our board right here. Our current production is 3 heat. We are not producing or manufacturing any plants. Our current steel discount is 4 thanks to these 2 cards right here. And we have no current titanium discount for our current corporation right here. So the way we would handle the income for this player is we would gain the 4 million credits as our bonus of playing the production card, which I've already taken. Then our current income is going to be based on our current terraforming rating plus our current mega credit income right here. So we have a current terraforming rating of 13. Plus 4 means that we would gain an income of 17 mega credits. And of course, at any time, you're more than welcome to trade out all these tokens for upper level tokens or lower level tokens. This is not a game that's going to cheat you on refunds or anything like that. For example, if we need to get extra mega credits, we can discard a card, and if we only need 2 of those mega credits, we wouldn't lose the 3rd mega credit. There's no cheating in this game. Basically, if you pay something, you get the difference back. That's just basically how the game works. So in this case, like I said, we would gain the 17 mega credits for having our current terraforming rating, plus our current cash injection we have for our corporation. We are not going to draw any cards. We will gain the 3 heat for our corporation right here, because that's our current heat production. We are not producing any plants. And again, remember, these 2 tracks down the bottom, they are not production tracks. They simply show discounts for our current corporation. That's basically how the production phase works. And then finally, we come to the research phase. Now, be very, very careful when you do the research phase, because there is an error on the player aids that come with the game. Make sure you follow the instructions that are actually on the research card itself and the instructions that come with the rulebook, because this is definitely an error on the research card phase description when we have the player aids right here. So the way the research phase is going to work is if this card is played, all the players at the table will draw 2 cards into their hand. We are not going to add these cards to our current hand yet, because we need to do some selecting of these cards. The nice bonus here, though, is that if you choose a research action, you will draw 3 additional cards for a total of 5 total cards that you are going to draw in your hand. Once you have looked at all these cards in your hand, you are going to discard either 3 of these cards if you chose research, or you can discard 1 of these cards if you didn't choose it. Because remember, if you didn't choose it, you only drew 2 cards. Look at both of them, discard 1 to the discard pile, and that card is going to go into your hand. If you chose a research action, remember, you drew 5 cards into your hand. Look at all 5 of the cards, keep 2, and then you are going to discard the other 3 cards from your hand. Once you've done that, you will add these cards into your hand. This is the one and only time that discarding cards does not actually give you income, because you are not actually putting those cards in your hand. Remember, you only get to discard cards from your hand for income. Since these cards never entered your hand, you don't get the income from discarding those cards from the research action. So that's all the actions for the game. After this, we simply move to the final thing, which is going to be the end step. During the end step, if you are using these tokens right here, you're simply going to refresh all these back down to face down. Again, if you use them, you really, again, you don't have to use them. They're kind of superfluous, because you can very easily look at the table right now and see if this person to develop, these 2 people did research. You don't have to do it. If you want to use them, feel free to do so. They are available for you. Once we refresh all these, every single player needs to look at their hand of project cards, not action cards, your hand of project cards. If you have more than 10 cards in your hand at this point, you must discard down to 10 cards. The nice thing here is though, remember, like I said, anytime you discard a card from your hand of project cards, you gain 3 million credits. So if we happen to have a pretty large hand of cards right now, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, we would discard 3 cards. And again, we can choose the cards to discard. And then we would gain 9 mega credits to our corporation because we have discarded cards. After this is done, we will now end the round and we will start another round of the game. And again, remember, every single round will start with us playing an action card from our hand. The only trick is you cannot play the same action cards you chose from the prior round. So again, all players will put down their action cards. All players reveal action cards. The prior round's action card goes back in your hand of possible action cards, and we're going to keep playing the game this way. The game is going to keep playing like this until we manage to get the heat to the max level, the oxygen to the max level, and until we reveal all ocean tiles. Whatever action phase we do that on is the final action phase for the game. We're getting up all our victory points based on our terraforming rating. We'll gain 1 victory point for every forest, whether it's a single, or when we get the 5, in case we get a whole bunch of these forests, we can always trade them in just for the 5s. Again, these are just for your convenience, but one of these is worth 5 forests or 5 victory points. One of these is worth 1 forest or 1 victory point in the game. Terraforming rating plus your forest plus any victory points that happen to be on any cards in your tableau. This will be on the right hand side of the card. These are individual victory points, and some of these will have random victory points based on certain resources you happen to have, or some will be set victory points. You add up all your victory points. Whoever has the most amount of victory points is the winner of the game of Terraforming Mars. Now that you understand how the game of Terraforming Mars Ares Expedition actually works, now I can explain to you how the cards themselves work, because it's going to make a heck of a lot more sense. So at the start of the game, like I said, every single player is going to get to draw 2 corporations, which will be dealt to them randomly. And then we'll look at the 2 corporations we have, and we're going to take one and discard it face down so the players don't know which corporation has been discarded, and also so we don't know what the other players at the table have quite yet. Now, every one of these corporations is going to start with a couple of different things that are going to explain our starting resources and possibly give us income. Now, a lot of the game of Terraforming Mars is color coordinated, so I don't know if anybody who has difficulties with colors can tell them apart or have any problems with this, but I would assume not due to the fact that they have some shading on the color itself. But again, if there's any problems, do understand there's lots of symbols and lots of text on these cards that should help somebody who has difficulty seeing color. But every single one of these corporations is going to be broken down in various different ways. The first thing you're going to see is in the upper right hand corner is the starting mega credits for whatever that corporation happens to represent. Every one of these corporations is going to have a name on it, and every one of these corporations is possibly going to have a symbol on the upper left hand corner. If it doesn't have that symbol, don't worry about it too much. It's basically going to be referenced by other cards. For example, you may put a card into play that says for every card that you have with a Saturn symbol on it, you will gain an increase of 1 million mega credits in your production. So that does also reference your current corporation. So just because you have your corporation off to the side, don't think that production cards can't also reference your current corporations. So again, these symbols may be referenced by other cards, but generally speaking, they're not going to reference themselves at all. So we don't need to worry about them as our corporations happen to be. Additionally, every one of these corporations may possibly give you a random starting bonus, such as extra cards. Some of them may give you special powers. Remember, special powers are anything that's in purple. Purple means that it's going to trigger when something occurs. For example, this one says effect. You may use heat as millions of credits or as mega credits. You may not use mega credits as heat. So this is a power for this corporation for the rest of the game. So remember, purple is triggers or things along those lines. And additionally, anything that happens to be in this reddish orange is going to be production or permanent income for your corporation, because that's the corporation you selected. So breaking this down very nice and easy, if we want to, let's say myself as a player, I decide that I am going to take the corporation of Hellion. So I would discard the corporation I did not select, and I would start with 28 million credits. So I'll take the 20, the 5, and then I will take 3 more mega credits, and that'd be my total starting mega credits for my corporation. I see that because it's listed right here. Next up, I'm going to see that my current heat production that I will start with before I have any production cards into play is going to be 3. This is my starting setup before I even start playing the game, before I played any cards down to my tableau. That's basically how that's going to be set up. And that's how all these symbols matter for our starting corporations. Now let's go and explain how the development cards, the construction cards, and the action cards all work with the symbols that are on them. Next up, we have our development cards. Now, development cards, again, they are project cards when they're in your hand. Once you put it in play, they are development cards and they are going to give you possible production or discounts on future card plays. But remember, when a card is a production card, or I'm sorry, a project card in your hand, it does not give you any of its benefits. Until a card is played down into the tableau, it gives you zero benefit except for the option of discarding from your hand for 3 million mega credits when you discard the card from your hand. So every one of these cards is going to be broken down with a couple different sections, a couple different requirements, and possible victory points they'll give you if you get them into your tableau. The way they're going to be broken down is you're going to see the cost to put the card into play, and you'll have to pay this cost. Of course, there may be a discount if somebody plays the correct development card, and that means you play it for the discount. But generally speaking, every single one of these cards is going to have a cost to put in play. 10 mega credits, 13 mega credits, 17 mega credits, 36 mega credits. And that's not going to cost you a reduction in production. That's basically going to take resources that you currently have in play, and you're going to discard those resources to get that card into play. Additionally, cards may have up to 3 symbols along the side in this section right here. And these symbols may represent steel, these symbols may represent titanium, they may represent plants, they may represent heat, they may represent science. Various different symbols may be referenced by other cards. For example, you may get a card that says for every science card you currently have in play, which would be the science symbol, which is white, with a symbol on top of it, for every science card you have in play, your production for mega credits is going to go up by 1. So basically, you're going to take the total of all the cards that have that symbol to go ahead and increase that income. Additionally, some cards may actually have a requirement before they can be even played, and that's going to be a symbol here. Now, the nice thing about all these symbols for these requirements, they are also going to be listed down in the text below. For example, this card says right here, requires yellow temperature or warmer to be put into play. Here's a symbol for it. Here's a reminder with a check mark to remind you that this card has a requirement to be put into play. Additionally, many cards are going to have a lightning bolt with the text down below. Any card with a lightning bolt means that once you put that card into play, you will gain that bonus one time and one time only. Now, there's one caveat to that rule, because there is an ability to play certain cards which allow you to take cards back into your hand. If you take a card back into your hand and play that card at a later date, you will gain that lightning bolt power again for playing the card a second time. But again, you have to pay the cost for that card. So make sure you're willing to make that sacrifice of cost to get that card back into play. Additionally, you're going to see that cards are going to have, when we're talking about development cards, we're going to have a symbol in an orangish reddish background, or it's going to be in more of those grayish silver background right here. If it's in a reddish background, that means it's going to be a permanent production increase for your corporation for the rest of the game, as long as that card happens to be in play. So for example, getting this card into play means that our mega credits production is going to go up by 3. This card says our heat is going to go up by 3. This one says our plant production is going to go up by 3. This one makes our income go up by 1 more. Plus, we're going to get a discount of 3 mega credits on all future titanium cards we may put into play. And the titanium symbol is that card right there. So that means that if I had this card in play already, to play this card, I'm going to get a discount of 3 mega credits to put this into play, because all titanium cards now for me, once this card is in play, are now cost 3 mega credits less. Discounts do stack, so if I play the development card on top of that, cost of this card is go from 36 mega credits all the way down to 30 mega credits again to play. Again, this card right here is going to symbolize that our discount on steel production is going to go down by 2 slots, which is 4 per card. And then finally, this card right here would symbolize that we would get 1 income on production for cards. We would gain 2 more heat, and then we would gain 2 more plants. So my current tableau happened to be in this state right now. This means every production phase, I'm going to gain 4 mega credits plus my terraforming rating. 1 card in my hand. Again, this is when a production phase happens. I will gain 5 heat, I will gain 5 plants, and anytime I play either one of these steel cards or titanium cards, I will get that discount. Next up, we have our blue and red cards. And the only way we can get our blue and red cards into play is by playing the construction. Remember, develop allows us to get green cards into play. Construction allows us to get our blue and our red cards into play. Now, the basic difference between blue and red cards is blue cards will give us actions, and the way we can tell this is going to give us an action, usable during the 3rd action phase. If there's these symbols with the blue background, that means it's usable during the action phase. Or if we have now the purple, that means it's going to be in effect, which will be triggered by something else occurring, generally speaking. These cards are very similar to the development cards in the fact that the cost to put this card into play will be listed on the upper left-hand corner of the card. Some of these may produce things that will help your tableau bring out other cards into play. For example, if I get these 2 cards into play, I have these 2 down arrows as part of my tableau. But we see to get Crater into play, I have to have at least 3 cards with down arrows into play before I put this into play. I can't count it if it's not in my tableau yet. So if I have this card in my hand, I cannot play until I get a 3rd card with a down arrow on it. Now the down arrows are on various different cards, and then once they're in play, I can get this card into play by spending the amount of mega credits to get it. Now these cards, like I said, are much like development cards. They'll have a check mark which shows a requirement. They'll have a lightning bolt, which will be basically a one-time effect. Now the big difference between the blue cards and the red cards is red cards, generally speaking, are one-time effects. You're going to put these cards into play. They'll give you a one-time effect listed on the bottom, and then generally speaking, they'll give you victory points, or they'll just have certain requirements or allow you to do things one time only when you put them into play. Nice thing about them is they do give you these symbols right here, which may be required to get other cards into play, which is very, very nice. For example, a card may say you need 4 of these sign symbols to get this card into play. If you have any of these red cards that offer that sign symbol, well, since they're in play, even though they're one-time use, they're part of your tableau. They'll allow you to get the other cards into play. So again, like I said, these cards are much like development cards. The only difference is instead of them influence your production, they'll either give you production or effects from other things happening, or they'll give you one-time uses. Again, just like the other cards, they may have requirements. They're also going to give you victory points. But those are the basic styles of cards that are in the game. You basically have your green development cards. You have your blue and red construction cards. Your blue cards may help you use actions. Again, these are going to influence the 5 phases for the game: the develop, the construction, the action, the production, and also the research phases. Now the nice thing about Terraforming Mars is the way the game is laid out, you can lay out your tableau very, very easily and see everything at a glance. Again, thanks to your production tracker that will keep track of everything right here. And basically what you want to do is you want to put out your development cards down here on the bottom, letting you know your current production. Lay out your action cards right here so you see your actions and your effects. And once you learn the symbols, you really don't need the text anymore, so you can simply look at the symbols and understand what the cards do. And then finally put your red cards a little bit off to the side, letting you know, because they're basically one-time actions, but you may need the symbols to get other cards into play. So this is basically how you play the game of Terraforming Mars. Now in this video, I'm not going to cover how to play the cooperative or how to play the solo rules themselves. I actually have a full video for the Patreon backers only that explains how to play the solo rules and actually play through an entire solo game. So if you want to check out the video, think about supporting the channel over on Patreon. Just $1 in the tip jar can help the channel keep growing strong. Hope you enjoyed this video. I hope you enjoyed this video series. If you have any comments or questions, make sure you leave them down in the YouTube comments down below. I will definitely get your video as quickly as I can. You can also feel free to email me at off-the-shelf board game reviews. That's otsbgr@gmail.com. Definitely answer your question as quickly as I can. Additionally, like I've already mentioned, if you enjoy this channel, if you enjoy this series, you want to help keep the channel going strong, think about tossing $1 in the tip jar over on Patreon. Just $1 in tip jar can help the channel keep growing, help me cover my costs, and help bring out more content for all of you out there to enjoy this wonderful gaming hobby. I hope you enjoy this video. I hope you enjoy this video series. If you do, click that like button, click that subscribe button, and as always, thanks for watching.